listen to this podcast.
Hello, and welcome to I Am the Podman, a Beatles podcast review. As you may have guessed, I am the Podman.
No, you're not,
said little Nicola. I Am the Podman will take a magical look at podcasts about the Beatles and review them for accuracy, production value, and entertainment value, and then answer the question, is this podcast worth listening to? As always, I'm recording in studio number 2 at Shabby Road Studios. Number 2, number 2, number 2. Which when turned back to front, sounds suspiciously like, "Turn me on, Podman. Turn me on, Podman. Turn me on, Podman." And yes, I know that would sound much better in stereo, but George Martin insists that the podcast be in mono. Thank you for listening, and please don't forget to like and subscribe, preferably before you listen to the show. Thanks again for listening. A splendid time is guaranteed for all. Episode 6, Podman VI, Cake and Crotches. An overwhelming number of people firmly believe that the Podman knows all. But one thing I know for sure is that you wouldn't subject yourself to this podcast if you weren't a huge Beatles fan. And unlike most groups, the Fab's music isn't the only thing most of us love about them. But today I want to reach around and talk about a subject that few fondle, and yet it looms large in their legend. I want to talk about the Beatles' balls.
Well, he told me that he'd been to see these young men in a dark cellar.
Yes.
He was always very interested in young men.
Oh, yes.
Youth clubs, Boy Scouts, that sort of thing.
Yes, yes.
But these, he said, were different.
In what way?
Well, the hair and the presents, the music.
He liked it?
No, he hated it.
Well, what did he like?
Well, the trousers.
What about their trousers?
Well, they were very tight.
Tight?
Yes, you could see quite clearly.
Oh, I see.
Everything. Outlines. Clear as day.
Yes, yes, thank you. Yes. So, tight trousers and
Nothing
noise.
left to the imagination.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, all 8 days a week of them. Well, the episode is subtitled Cake and Crotches. What did you expect? And when I say balls, I'm not just talking about the White Album poster or the 2 versions cover. Nuts to that. I'm saying that in addition to being the greatest band of all time, the Beatles were also the ballsiest band of all time. Oh, sure, you say that they were immensely famous and rich, so they could afford to take chances. They could experiment with virtually the entire second side of their final album and make it a medley of 8 song snippets.
Day after day. Okay.
My boys are ready to go.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Tell you what.
Is it possible without affecting yourselves too much to turn down a little? Apparently there's been a complaint
From who?
from somebody outside the building.
What are they doing here at this time of night? What guy?
He's going through the walls apparently.
His own fault to get the house in such a lousy district. Oh, I'm losing my cool.
George Harrison is resting his arm.
Let it be known unto the people. George is getting silly, George. Sir, George is getting silly. Can't find him. You're going a bit faster, Ringo.
Sorry, did I miss? I went wrong. Did I?
I thought I heard you singing Octopus's Garden with John.
Or you all came late.
Okay. You win. I'm in love with you. Well, all right. Okay, eh? Okay.
You never give me your coffee. Okay, come on now. Here it is, boys. Here it is. Come on, boys.
How was it?
That's harpsichord, Jeff.
Is my hair all right, Jeff?
Oh, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Her Majesty's...
Yeah, we'll have him, we'll have him! His sister Bernice works in the furnace. Okay, fab gear. Kick out the jam, take a...
Brothers and sisters!
Well, that was superb. Right, George?
They could start 1969 by giving themselves 3 weeks to write and learn an album's worth of songs to perform in concert.
Let it be, let it be.
What the shit in hell's going on
That's
here?
die Franken Schlabel. Nachts die
Das war ein Gekutschgescheinen, wasn't it, ja?
Ja.
And they could record a 30-song double album against their producer's advice.
Yeah, it's getting better all the time.
USSR.
You don't have it, won't you somehow explain? Sooner or later, she was to go completely berserk under the care of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. All the people around were very worried about the girl because she was going insane. So we sang to her.
Thank you.
Daddy went a bit crazy. Daddy.
Hey, 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 hey. Love you forever and I hardly think so.
Well, you know, gentlemen, I mean...
It verges from the sublime to the ridiculous.
Hello, Paul.
I don't like marmalade.
Lady MacDonald!
Rattle them skulls.
I'm a fabulous, fabulous vegetarian.
One more time.
If you want me to, I won't.
Yes, you will. Wasn't it great?
Okay, lads. Right. We're on.
Yeah.
Hold it, Harry. Keep that one. Mark it fab.
They could release a single with a running time over 7 minutes against the advice of their producer.
Terribly sorry. Mal, first string.
Judy, night minor. 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey Jude, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better. Remember to let her into your heart. Then you can start to make it better. Hey Jude, don't be afraid. You were made to go out and get her. The minute you let her under your skin, then you begin to make it better.
You see, that's the difficulty of that, because your concept, because if somebody said, no, it doesn't go like that, it goes like that, but it goes like that, and it goes through everything, and it can be, you know what I mean, just one bit of music can be pop, jazz, classic, whatever you want to do to it, it is.
How are we doing, Hal?
There's some great moments singing in that, Paul, but it wasn't the one.
To make it better. It's the second one out of every 3, it is the one.
Do you want to hear any of it before you do any more, or do you want to go straight for another? Hey, 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 Jude. Okay, lads, we're on.
And 2 crates if you do twist and shout.
Okay.
Trousers goes on the pedal.
Take them off.
Well, I felt closer to it then, Paul. I must admit I felt closer to it.
Yeah, I did it myself, John.
They could load a bus full of actors and drive around and make a movie without a script. Sort of. They could record the first concept album about their childhood in Liverpool, all of that under a pseudonym.
We're sitting in the hushed semicircular theatre waiting for the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band to come on, and here they come now, playing the first number. Let's go! All right. I can't do it from home, and I'll be dizzy.
Laudate con Ulowoke Reklawa.
Oh, no, 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 no. I refuse to go.
A Day in the Life. This is take 8, and it's the choir for the end. Choir? Take 1. This is called Good Morning, I believe. I'm not sure about that.
That's right.
They released 2 albums that didn't even feature the name of the band on the cover.
What is it? He robbed me that bit that you did right off. So
I was just thinking in the toilet, so I think I should get it.
Paul.
Going from the future still looks good.
Oh, I see. Okay.
What's that?
And so if you'll, so it's just the. And you got time to rectify all
Just
the
from
things
there?
that, yeah, that's just that line.
Not even the.
No. Well, there'll be a lead in before.
Oh God, yes, of course there will.
But will you rub off what else I'm doing?
Well, I'm just going to start recording you. I'll give you beforehand, but I'll start recording you on the future still looks good.
Okay. breath left.
Things that oh, right in there, is it?
No.
Which bit was that?
I'd like you to sing the future still looks good again.
Yeah.
Yes, I will, but I didn't really know exactly if that was the end of Think for Yourself, because I won't be there with you. That's what I thought it was going to be. And so it's starting exactly on the although. But it's hard to recognise it just from the chords, which line I'm up to, really.
Do you want to hear your words?
No.
No, God, we have never heard them once, you fool. No wonder we've been getting it wrong.
I'm hearing up here.
Wonderful for you.
They're lovely.
Wonder if Ron Richards is free tomorrow.
Here it comes.
Paul.
I just got in from Olympia. I lit the torch.
The future still looks good, and you've got time to rectify all.
I got that down. You see, I just...
Why don't you leave that one out?
Yeah, just leave it out again then.
Okay. Don't ride me, don't ride me. Get off my back.
Was that the last one?
We'll just give you that last one again. Just before the last one.
But all of these things were done by very famous, very rich Beatles. But there's one thing that to me is the best illustration of Beatles balls, Beatles chutzpah, if you will. It all started in early June of 1962. The Beatles had completed what they thought was their first recording session at EMI Studios in Abbey Road. John, Paul, George, and Pete had recorded Besame Mucho, Love Me Do, P.S. I Love You, and Ask Me Why, and had every reason to believe that Love Me Do would be their first single. Little did they know that George Martin was not enamored of any of those songs, and had instructed the session producer, Ron Richards, to find a suitable song for the group to record as their first single. That Love Me Do thing, that could be a B-side. So the Beatles, now John, Paul, George, and new drummer Ringo Starr, returned to Abbey Road on Tuesday, September 4th, 1962, having been sent an acetate of a song by Mitch Murray, How Do You Do It? George Martin had instructed the Fabs to learn the song, and they would record it at that session, and it would be their first single. The Beatles made some changes in the tempo, trying to make the song sound like their style, but the truth was, they hated the song. Now, the Scruffs, who hadn't yet put out a record, who had been turned down by every record company in England, who, by the grace of God, or as punishment, had a producer who they knew and respected, did a couple of takes, and voila! How Do You Do It, backed with Love Me Do, would be the first single by a little-known group from Liverpool, the Beatles. Done.
How do you do what you do to me? I wish I knew. If I knew how you do it to me, I'd do it to you. How do you do what you do to me? I'm feeling blue. Wish I knew how you do it to me, but I haven't a clue. You give me a feeling in my heart, ooh la la, like an arrow passing through it. Suppose that you think you're very smart, but won't you tell me how do you do it? How do you do what you do to me? I wish I knew. If I knew how you do it to me, I'd do it to you. Passing through it. I suppose that you think you're very smart, but won't you tell me how do you do it? How do you do what you do to me? I wish I knew. Wish Wish I knew how you do it to me, but I haven't a clue. Wish I knew how you do it to me, I do it to you. Wish I knew how you do it to me, I do it to you.
Except, even at this virtually unknown, virtually penniless point in their careers, they had freaking balls. John Lennon, 7 years before Two Virgins, was ready to show them. He marched into the control booth and told George Martin point blank that they didn't want the song released as their first single. Years later, John said,
"Hey, this is news. I always remember this, everybody else forgets it. There's a Beatle version of How Do You Do It, How Do You Do, that Jerry and the Pacemakers finally put out. When we first got in the studio, they tried to give us other people's songs. They didn't like ours. And we did, it forced us to do a version of How Do You Do What You Do to Me. It's me and Paul. How do you do what you do to me? I wish I knew, you know, like that.
Oh, wow.
And that's around, man, and it's a straight, and it's a record, you know.
Oh, that's wild. I want to look at it.
And Jerry did it, and we wouldn't let him put it out, you know. We said we shouldn't have no contract and all the tantrums bit, you know, then put that crap out, because it was rubbish, you know. I mean, we thought it was rubbish compared with Love Me Do, you see. We thought ours had more meaning.
How did your record of How Do You Do compare to what Jerry and the Pacemakers did?
Well, I think Brian gave Jerry our version, and Jerry virtually did our version, but he missed out. We did a few Buddy Holly touches in the middle. We threw in a few extra lines or something, which Jerry didn't do.
Paul said, "I suppose we were quite forceful, really, for people in our position. The Beatles, all between the ages of 18 and 22 at that point, had no position. That makes their insistence so amazing. Love Me Do would be the first single, with How Do You Do It not being released during the Beatles' career. While shelving How Do You Do It had very little to do with the Beatles' protestations, them standing up for themselves at that point showed the mettle of these four. It showed that those Beatles had balls."
I got blisters on my fingers!
Today, on this very special episode of Blossom. No, not really. Today on this very special episode of I Am the Podman. No, they're all special, aren't they? Actually, a lot of the comments I'm getting do mention something about special needs. But anyway, this segment, I'll be reviewing one of the longest-running Beatle podcasts, and possibly the first or one of the first podcasts that I listened to, the Fab Four Free-For-All. Fab Four Free-For-All started in the fall of 2009 as the Fab Forum, with hosts Rob Leonard, Tony Chiguardo, Mitch Axelrod, and Ken Michaels. This version lasted for over 100 episodes before Ken Michaels departed, and the newer and bluer show, Fab Four Free-For-All, started in September 2014. The show just released episode 256 on March the 6th of this year. In their 10 years of existence, Fab Four Free-For-All has interviewed such luminaries as Giles Martin, May Pang, David Bedford, Cousin Brucey Morrow, Steve Van Zandt, Bruce Spicer, Ken Womack, Tom Murray, Lawrence Juber, Bruce Sugar, Bunny Carlos, Alan Kozin, Richard Buskin, and countless others too numerous to count. This episode, I'll be reviewing episode 247, The Beatles' 20 Greatest Hits versus The Beatles' 1. Let's hear it straight from Mitch, Tony, and Rob getting introduced by the great Bob Eubanks.
Hi there, this is Bob Eubanks, and you're listening to Fab Four Free-For-All. But doesn't everybody?
And welcome to another edition of the Fab Four Free-For-All, the Beatles radio show on the internet, where we talk about everything Beatles and Beatles related. I am Mitch Axelrod, your moderator for tonight's show, and joining me, as they always do, and I'm so glad they do, are Tony Chiguardo.
Hi, folks.
And Rob Leonard.
Hello. Did you mention the show name?
Yes, I did.
Oh, you did? Okay. I wasn't sure if you mentioned. I was like...
And Not listening once again is Rob Leonard.
Thank you. I'm here, right here. Yes, I'm listening to everything you say, Mitch.
And what? I'm sorry. And Tony is listening. Hi, Tony.
Hey there.
All right. So tonight's episode is going to be a little different for us. We're going to explore the battle of two albums. And I know that sounds weird, but we're going to discuss 20 greatest hits and the Beatles won.
Now, at the onset of Beatle dementia, I should mention that I alter my Podman methodology a bit. Usually, I review a recent or the most recent episode of any given podcast. But out of respect for this long-running podcast, and because the most recent episode is about the 423rd release of Band on the Run, I asked Fab 4 Free-for-Aller Mitch Axelrod to suggest one of Fab 4 Free-for-All's recent episodes that he was particularly proud of. And one of those was episode 247. Mitch also might have said that he likes this episode because on it he sounds much more knowledgeable than Rob and Tony. No, he didn't really say that, but he could have because he really does. No, just kidding. I was recently interviewed by Marv Kibel's fabulous podcast, Pods Like Us, and when talking about some of my favorite podcasts, I mentioned Fab 4 Free-for-All and stole a line from my friend Professor Steve Allen, who said of the Fab Fourers, "It's like the Three Stooges have a Beatles podcast." And because I know Tony, Rob, and Mitch would take that as a huge compliment, I would agree. These three guys have known each other for a very long time, and in their often hysterical timing with each other, that familiarity and friendship shows. Okay, Mitch, is that enough for the C-note you promised if I made up nice things to say? But enough silliness. Let's get into the episode and therefore more silliness. The lads compare the sales of Beatles 1, issued in 2020, with sales of over 30 million worldwide, and Beatles' 20 Greatest Hits, which is essentially the same track lineup, issued in 1982, with worldwide sales at about 3 million. They review the late 70s and early 80s glut of inferior packaging. 1976, rock and roll music, 1977, love songs, 1978, rarities in Britain, and 1980, rarities in the United States. 1982, real music, and 7 months later, 20 Greatest Hits in October of 1982. Not to mention box sets in 1978 in the US and in the UK in early 1977, Live at the Star Club double album, the 1977 Hollywood Bowl live album, and so many others from Germany, Holland, Canada. There was a huge glut of recycled Beatles. The Free-for-Allers talk about 1973's Blue and Red albums and agree that it's more of a career retrospective rather than a greatest hits. But if it's a hits compilation, what else would you include? I think you could maybe make an argument for Twist and Shout, but other than that, They mention that after John's murder, Capitol was selling an average of 220,000 Lennon and Beatle albums per day. Mitch notes that every song on 20 Greatest Hits is also on the Red and Blue albums. They talk about how EMI wanted to commemorate the 20-year anniversary of Love Me Do with some product in 1982, and they did do a specific release of Love Me Do that went to number 4 on the singles charts in Great Britain. There's a trivia question for you. What's the highest chart number that Love Me Do reached in Great Britain? Is it 17? No, it's number 4. But the reasons for the relative failure of 20 Greatest Hits is put down to several factors by the lads. First, the sound quality was dreadful. The 59-minute, 31-second running time, even with a monstrously shortened version of Hey Jude.
Hey Jude, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better.
led to a really bad pressing. I agree, the album sounded dreadful. The lads talk about how 20 Greatest Hits failure negatively impacted future Beatle releases. I can't agree. There were approximately 10 Beatles releases, not to mention solo albums, the Ruddles and Klaatu, in the 6 years leading up to 20 Greatest Hits, an album that, again, sold almost 4 million albums and was the 27th biggest-selling album of 1982 in the U.S., beating out Tug of War at number 40 and Real Music, no surprise there, at 132. The John Lennon Collection was at number 11 for 1982. The Beatles' 20 Greatest Hits outsold Yesterday and Today, Something New, Anthology 3, Let It Be Naked, Rock and Roll Music, and even the figurehead of this podcast episode, Beatles VI, Beatles 6, or Beatles VI. Whichever way you want to pronounce it, it was outsold by Beatles' 20 Greatest Hits. The lads also cite the cover as a negative, and again, I don't really agree. While a bit of tweaking would have certainly improved the cover, it's the first graphic use of the Beatles' famous drop T logo on an album. Well, World Records out of Australia released a box featuring the Beatles' drop T logo presented as a shipping label on a crate in 1980. The collage on the inner sleeve was a nice update or improvement of the colored Through the Years poster that was used as a promo with Rock and Roll Music, which itself is a hand-colored and updated version of the black and white Beatles Decade poster from 1974. Now, don't get me wrong, this was a cash grab album that sounded terrible, but it speaks to the sorry state of Capitol Records in 1982. I believe the John Lennon Collection was Capitol's top-selling album that year. Again, Capitol's philosophy with 2 Beatles compilations released in 1 year, Real Music and 20 Greatest Hits, shows how far the record company weasels would go to milk their most famous cash cow, the Beatles. The Fab Four Free-For-All lads then jump ahead to 2020 and the Beatles 1 compilation and discuss George Martin and Paul, George, and Ringo having had a hand in compiling that CD.
George Martin and the 3 surviving Beatles say, we're going to help on this compilation that you guys want to do. And the thing is, they take, and this is, again, very controversial because they take the 27 songs that went number 1 in the UK on the record retailer chart. And that's important.
Yes.
And the US on the Billboard Hot 100.
All right.
So, Please Please Me is not there because it went number 1 on every single chart except the record retailer chart.
So here's how it went. So, guys, do you think we should include Please Please Me in Strawberry Fields? John, what do you think? Oh, John's not here. Okay, so, no, let's leave those off.
Number 1 was standardized globally, which led to some oddities. No Please Please Me, which is just a stupid omission, and No Strawberry Fields Forever, which in the Beatles' history is the second time Strawberry Fields Forever was a foolish omission on an album. Mitch and Rob note that Beatles 1 is a great package with the Avedon photos, the striking cover, and the remix tracks with a 79-minute running time. It's a great CD for the car. Rob also pointed out that it was typically $9.99, which was a great bargain. Mitch mentions the rise of the internet and the Beatles' website advertising number 1, and they all think it really factored into it becoming the biggest selling Beatles CD of all time.
In 1964, 4 men from Liverpool came to America and changed the world forever. The Beatles, 1, the ultimate collection from the greatest band in history. All 27 of the Beatles' number 1 hits available on 1 CD for the first time ever. Special packaging includes the famous Richard Avedon photos of the Beatles and a 32-page booklet. Hey Jude, don't the Beatles, 1. 27 number 1 songs that started a revolution and changed the sound of music forever. To order The Beatles 1, call the number on your screen or send $18.98 for CD or $11.98 for cassette plus $4.95 shipping and handling to the address below. Call now.
So, should you bother listening to Fab 4 Free For All? It is one of the oldest Beatle podcasts, with, between its two incarnations, almost 400 episodes. But is it good? Let me put it this way. Technically, it's well recorded and well produced. As far as being worth your time, let's just say that listening to Fab 4 Free For All is like heading downtown to that restaurant that you used to go to as a kid, sitting at the same booth you sat in with your mom and dad 50 years ago, ordering a pizza and a pitcher, and spending the afternoon. There may be a dusting of snow outside in this scene that I'm imagining. And spending the afternoon with your three best friends who know their stuff, talking, debating, joking about the greatest band of all time. And, you know that can't be bad. Here's a little section I like to call Media City.
Well, I've been in Meat City to see for myself. Well, I've been in Meat City to see for myself. Been in Meat City.
No, John, it's Media City, not Meat City.
So, sorry, Mr. Podman, sir. I completely misunderstood. I hope you can forgive me.
Not to worry, Johnny. You are forgiven.
Thank you kindly.
Anyway, on Media City, I'll be talking about various media concerning the Beatles. They may be TV shows, books. It was my intention to make this segment solely about the several YouTube channels that compile Beatle references, and I will briefly discuss the many channels that do this. But in the past month, there has been so much Beatle news that I have to address a few things. But let's start with some of the very entertaining YouTube videos. The video channels feature multiple Beatle references. Now, I should say that many of these channels duplicate clips, but who cares? So in no particular order, Hypehouse has a 9-minute video, The Beatles References in Films and TV Shows, which is very cute except for an annoying test pattern between each clip. A channel, Jamie Secondary, has a clip of a Beatles reference in The Wiggles. But not everything is cute. One of the more disturbing channels is named Stanley Kubrick's Glass Onion Rabbit Hole, in which the narrator lays out his theory that the movie The Shining is actually a telling of the Beatles story and ends with a prediction of John Lennon's murder. This is a 14-part series, and for those of us who are Pink Floyd fans, he also does a 2001 Pink Floyd series. A channel, Cybermat 12, has a 5-minute clip show of the Beatles references in Doctor Who. Talk about being as relevant as today's headlines. Well, actually May 11th's headlines, because that's when the Disney Channel starts streaming Doctor Who's Season 14. This clip features mentions of the Fabs on Doctor Who and several stills, because of copyright, from the Fabs' 25-second appearance in the Doctor Who episode The Chase, broadcast on May 22nd, 1965. The show is the only surviving footage of the Beatles performing, actually miming, Ticket to Ride on Top of the Pops. A channel, Jugs McGee, has a brief video with references in the video game Earthbound, because the game creator, Shigetsu Itoa, is apparently a huge Beatles fan. But not all the references really make sense. Nico Senpai has a video, 100 references to the Beatles. It's in Spanish, but many of the video clips with music are in English. One of the things I quite like is that the narrator identifies the show the clips come from. Another thing I like is that this video contains one of my favorite references.
Jamás creí que admiraras a los Beatles. Por supuesto que sí, eran más grandes que Jesús, pero su hijo se volvió Yoko y rompió mi colección.
This one also contains movie references and anime references. By the way, the Minions get the Abbey Road order wrong. This one is 17 minutes long and is great if you speak Spanish. The channel TV References has a cute 3-minute video, the Beatles references in The Simpsons, which feature the great billboard to increase the Springfield tourist trade, Springfield, birthplace of the Beatles. A page, PokePidge, spends 5 minutes cross-referencing the games Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield with the Beatles, and you got to give the presenter some points for creativity. Adam Kay has an 8-minute video explaining references in the Beatles video game. This very early style game is a free download from a company called Newgrounds and allows the user to play through the Beatles' career. It looks like it's well worth the price. The channel Beatlemania 22 has several Beatles-related videos based on the references in Teen Titans, most of which are related to Yellow Submarine. Unfortunately, this video consists of stills that aren't in the greatest quality. Now we're getting to the top 3. Now we're getting to the top 3 YouTube channels for this strange genre. The first is named Mixcartney. It has a huge amount of Beatles content with a focus on Paul, but so many of them are really fun to watch. The Podman recommends. Alexander Greensmith concentrates on video games and their Beatle references. TARDIS Tennis, Earthbound, both have numerous Beatle references. In another video, Alex reviews Sonic the Hedgehog and its main villain, Dr. Eggman. The game Firewatch has many references, mostly about Paul McCartney. 2015's Wolfenstein New Order has multiple Beatle references of the Beatles in a victorious Nazi Germany, recording their entire catalog in German. The game Life is Strange has lots of rock music references, and many of those are Beatles related. Alexander promises to add more Beatles and video games references in the future. And now we come to the Nowhere Man 113 channel, the undisputed champion of Beatles-related videos. Among his video titles are Celebrities' Favorite Beatles Songs, Beatles Tattoos, 100 Greatest Songs, Beatles Influence, Beatles Grammy Awards, and Beatles statues and memorials from around the world. But I want to concentrate on the Beatle reference video. Separate videos for each of the following TV shows: Friends, The Sopranos, Mindhunter, Breaking Bad, Ted Lasso, Gilmore Girls, and Veep. And an 1 and 6-minute video, Beatles references in movies. This goes back to the movies from 1964 and is fantastic. What a monumental task, and we all appreciate his work. As rigorous as it may be, it doesn't contain one of my favorite Beatle references. But in Nowhere Man 113's defense, it's not from a movie, but from an HBO show from 1988. Tanner 88 was a 6-part series about the 1988 Democratic presidential primary. Tanner's staff discourages him from answering questions with real answers rather than political speak. After losing primary after primary to career politicians like Gary Hart, Joe Biden, and Caucus, despicable men who offer nothing in the way of morality or vision, he gets fed up and makes this speech.
You know, TJ, just before you called me last spring, Lexi and I went down to the Democratic Leadership Conference in South Carolina. But last night we were sitting around with Kirk O'Donnell and Hart, Biden, a couple of the other candidates. We were shooting the breeze about how much the party had changed since the 60s. And suddenly, out of the blue, Lexi turned to Hart and she asked him who his favorite Beatle was. Now, at first, Hart laughed, and then he stumbled around trying to remember a name. Then she repeated her question for Biden, and Biden said, well, he'd never been a Beatles fan. He was into jazz. And Dukakis answered Paul, because he liked his wife or something. Now, I don't know if Lexi knows the names of all the Beatles herself, let alone the answer to her own question. But it suddenly dawned on me that I sure as hell did. And I knew for sure that anybody who didn't had absolutely no claim to generational leadership. Now, I must have, 10 years on Joe Biden. But damn it, he wasn't paying attention back then, and I was. And one of the things I figured out very early on was the singer mattered as much as the song. That ideas were only as valuable as the people who got behind them. I mean, people that wouldn't settle. People unafraid of honest inquiry. People who didn't mind asking the impertinent question. God, the impertinent question. Where the hell would we be without it? It's the glory and the engine of all human experience. Copernicus asked it, shook the foundations of his world. Darwin asked it. He's repudiated to this day. Thomas Jefferson asked it. So invigorated by it, he declared it to be an inalienable right. I'm not smart enough to know all the answers. But I do know we've got to keep asking the questions. That's what the American experiment is all about. It's at the very core of our character as a people. We owe our vigor to its constant renewal. You know, I don't have much patience for these guys who go around saying the pride is back in America. For some of us, it never left. Vietnam may have covered some patriots in shame, but not this one. We got in there for moral reasons, and by God, we got out of there for moral reasons. Where else on this earth does such debate center on anything other than expediency? Only in America. Watergate, triumph of the system. How could anybody watch Barbara Jordan thunder away at those House hearings and not feel a surge of pride in the miracle of this country? Now, there are those people who tell you that our noisy dissent, our raucous squabble, weakened us as a country, caused us to lose our supremacy. Don't you believe it? We are the envy of this world. Why? Because throughout our history, we have always maintained that we could do better. We've insisted that we could do better. We've always been willing to reinvent ourselves for the common good. And in our darkest hour, leaders, real leaders, have always stepped forward to hold the American people to the responsibility of citizenship. Well, it's time for that kind of leadership now, TJ. I'm not sure that it's me, but I'd like the chance to find out. Oh, and if you young people are still wondering, the right answer is John Lennon.
Sadly, the more it changes, the more it stays the same. And so, not to end on a downer, here's the English version of my favorite Beatles reference, courtesy of The Simpsons.
I never knew you were such a Beatles fan.
Of course I am. They were bigger than Jesus.
So that would have been it for this episode of Media City, except we've had several important developments in Beatleland. Beyoncé recorded a version of the Beatles song Blackbird.
Blackbird singing in the dead of night, Take these broken wings and learn to fly all your life. You were only waiting for this moment to arise. You were only waiting for this moment to arise. Blackbird singing.
And it really caused a twitter. It was a strange recording in that it used the Beatles' original backing track, and the way the credits of the song ran were confusing and questionable. Some people hated it and expressed their disdain in social media and were promptly labeled as racists. I imagine most of them hate Yoko as well. Haters! At the same time, social justice warriors praised the song and both Paul and Beyoncé for taking up the mantle of racial equality. Paul for having written a song way back in 1968 about the horrible plight of black women, apparently especially those that tweet in aviary fashion. I'm not 100% sure exactly when Paul attached the social meaning to Blackbird. Perhaps it was at the insistence of his fired publicist, Jeff Baker. Anyway, here is audio of Paul from 1968 talking to Donovan about what was and what specifically was not his inspiration for the song.
I sang it to Diana Ross the other night. She took offence. Not really. But I didn't mean it like that originally. I remember. Really? Yeah, I just read it in the paper about riots and that. Birds singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life, you were only waiting for this moment.
It's funny because when you were just singing, I was saying, what a way to colour a blackbird. You know, so many beautiful colours to lift a blackbird.
The Podman's call. Beyoncé's version is fine. I like it. End of story. So, we also were informed that Paul's one-hand clapping will be released on vinyl and CD on June 14th, 2024. Since this is taken from live studio sessions from 1974, the vinyl release will come in 74 color variations. And most exciting, one-hand clapping will also be available in an Ultra Edition for $1,799. That will come in a refrigerated container that includes the CD, the vinyl, the black version, and an actual human hand that will be limited to 10,000 editions.
This sense of humor of mine, it isn't funny at all.
Okay, that's enough sarcasm for one podcast. We also learned that two of the finest Beatle podcasts, I Am the Egg Pod and Nothing Is Real, will cease production. Welcome to I Am the Podman, a Beatles podcast review. Everybody thinks they know about the Podman, but how much do we really know? Probably not as much as we think we do. As a Beatles fan and an alleged podcaster, I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Chris Shaw, Stephen Cockcroft, and Andrew Carty. Their work on their podcasts is the yardstick by which all Beatle podcasts will be judged. From all of us, thank you, gentlemen. And of course, saving the cherry on top, on May the 8th, our friends at the Disney Channel, well, I didn't completely swear off sarcasm. Our friends at the Disney Channel will present a Peter Jackson supervised, cleaned up and audio-corrected version of Michael Lindsay Hogg's 1970 film, Let It Be.
The Beatles. Rehearsing, recording, rapping, relaxing, philosophizing, creating. The Beatles. Live in a new motion picture.
Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. Yeah, there will be an answer. Let it be.
The Beatles. Let It Be. 10 new songs. Intimate experience with the Beatles. A new motion picture. Let It Be.
Now, way back in November of 2001, several days before Get Back aired, I rewatched Let It Be. It wasn't anywhere near as bad as I seem to remember it. I wound up feeling sorry for Lindsay Hogg as he tried to eke out a story from all the footage, and rather than it being some magnificent documentary about a Beatles concert, the story he went with, almost had to go with, was that of the disintegration of the band. The timing of the release in 1970 didn't help. So I'm really looking forward to Let It Be, and will undoubtedly be sharing my completely worthless opinion with both of my listeners in the not-too-distant future.
This sense of humor of mine, it isn't funny at all.
From time to time, it's fun to take a look at podcasts that aren't about the Beatles, but spend an episode talking about the Fab Four. The podcast Think Funny started in November 2018 with weekly podcasts and appears to have discontinued as of October 2021 with its 77th episode. I'll be looking at the episode from January 23rd, 2019 on the Beatles. The write-up for Think Funny reads, quote, "Blowing your mind and tickling your funny bone. The guys discuss an interesting topic each week with their unique and hilarious thoughts," end quote. The show is hosted by Aaron Donnelly, Nate Sadler, and Aaron's brother Matt Donnelly, and is billed as, quote, "the show that only thinks it's funny." Amen. So the boys talk a bit about Donovan and Number 9 and the Beatles mixtape that Aaron made for Matt, and this introduction should give you some idea of the lack of structure in the show. They finally get down to talking about the Beatles, sort of.
See, I picked Beatles because of our shared love for the Beatles, and I wasn't sure about Matt. For sure, I knew maybe he liked them. I didn't know if he loved them, but just how I would probably still be listening to rap music if it wasn't for the Beatles. Like, love for the Beatles, because that's kind of the bridge that took me into rock music. You know, that was my first rock love, was the Beatles.
Right.
So that's what got me interested in that kind of music. I mean, and then
What was your attraction?
You know what I think it was? We couldn't listen to non-Christian music except for oldies. And I remember that early Beatles was acceptable, but later Beatles was very suspect, you know?
Where's the cutoff?
Probably Rubber Soul was the cutoff.
Rubber Soul, yeah.
Still, it was around, and so I remember, like, Dad had a 45. I remember listening to Revolution and thinking how awesome it was, you know. And I was thinking about this a lot. Like, why did I like the Beatles so much? And they're very genuine and authentic. Like in their interviews, they come across as really interesting people. You know, even
you always hear that. That's
Yeah.
the common thread you hear about when you watch these documentaries on the Beatles. Is they're just so like they have gravitas. Like they're so funny and interesting and just. You know, they have that aura about them. You can see it on when they first arrived in New York, you know.
Yeah, and there was a difference that they did that before them, entertainers were sort of subservient to like the interviewers and they were well behaved. When the Beatles came, they were just irreverent. They were just themselves. They didn't fake a persona necessarily. They were just kind of themselves, and it was really fun. I think that's that genuine authenticity when you come from the 50s or when everything's canned and sort of as it should be and prepared, and then you actually see someone that's authentic, it's really attractive.
I like how they've changed throughout the years to adjust to, changes in their own lives, just to, like you said, to keep it authentic.
Right.
You see the progression, and they were ahead of their time at every step, it seemed like.
Great observations, even if they don't get the concept of gravitas quite right. But in addition to the horrible sound of the podcast, each brief bit of dialogue is separated by that odd drum machine-driven snippet of on-hold music. They compare George Martin, the producer and the author of Game of Thrones, at length. Now, if I may, I think the Beatles, being the greatest band of all time, were also incredibly funny. But this podcast really doesn't bring up their humor at all. The three guys laugh a lot, they think funny, or, to be fair, they think they're funny, but not so much. But their Beatle knowledge is spot on.
Matt, do you have any? I know you said you're more John Lennon, but is there any Beatles songs or albums you like?
I'd say probably the White Album. Just because it's that final transition, and to me it just sounded non-experimental, but just real authentic, like Aaron was saying before.
They talk about the White Album. They say John Lennon said that wasn't the Beatles. It was everyone doing their own thing, and then a bunch of those combined. But I love the White Album. It was made during the time, a lot of it during the time when they were in India with the Maharishi. There's one that's not even that popular, but it's called Long, Long, Long.
Yep.
And it's just really smooth, and I don't know. I love the White Album.
On the White Album, Matt, are there any songs that are your favorites, or you just kind of
probably the most popular, like Hey Jude and Penny Lane. I don't know. It's Day in the Life. Is Day in the Life on that album too?
Actually, none of those three you just said are on that album.
I didn't want to
like the White Album. Maybe it's a different one. Let It Be. That's what I meant.
Let It Be. Okay, so yeah, Let It Be is great. Did you ever get Let It Be naked?
No, I did not.
Because when Let It Be came out, it wasn't the last album they did, but it was the last album to come out. They had this failed documentary they were going to do of just them making an album. And so it had a bunch of recording of them in the studio, and they started sort of fighting. You can actually see just snippets of it. They never, I don't think, ever released the full documentary. Have you ever seen it, Nate?
No, what's it called?
Let It Be.
Oh,
yeah.
That's an Apple type.
So there is snippets of it where you can see George and Paul sort of going at each other a little bit. It's kind of not direct, but indirect. And then they basically walked away from the whole thing. And,
really?
Yeah. And they said, and then when they came together again, they were like, let's do this one more time. Let's make a great album. that's when they made Abbey Road. Abbey Road then came out, and then afterwards they released Let It Be, the songs on Let It Be, even though they were recorded before. And what was his name? The producer. Oh,
Yoko.
No, the Wall of Sound guy.
The crazy hair murderer.
Yeah. I can't
Phil
believe.
Spector.
Yeah. So Phil Spector took the Let It Be songs and did his Phil Spector thing onto it, and some of them sound so.
So he murdered a lady and threw her in the
background.
He never got convicted for that, did he? Or did he?
I think he had
I'm sure he did.
Insanity.
Yeah, he did. No, Matt's right. He did.
Hospital somewhere.
Yeah, they were. I remember the thing I remember about that murder is he was trying to say it was suicide because she shot herself through the mouth or something, but she had a closed mouth because her teeth were shot through. So no one does that when they commit suicide. But that's just one.
Yeah, for what you know.
Yeah, for what I know. Yeah.
I just want to know if he had that hairstyle before he pleaded insanity or after. Definitely going to help the case.
Yeah, it's going to help his case. His lawyer was like, no, don't fix your hair. Come like that. Come like that.
Yep, you're perfect, babe.
Okay, so maybe not exactly spot on, but A Day in the Life is my favorite song on the White Album as well. At one point in the podcast, they refer to Pete Best as, quote, kind of an ass, end quote, and wonder how he didn't commit suicide. Wow, yuck it up. Geraldo Rivera Collectibles is up next. Why? Beats me. Aaron reveals that his favorite album is Help, and I've Just Seen a Face is his favorite Beatles song, but Matt is surprised that his favorite album isn't Rubber Soul.
Aaron, I thought you would go for Rubber Soul for some reason.
Yeah.
I always thought you were a huge Rubber Soul fan.
Yeah. I like, Norwegian Woods on Rubber Soul.
Yep.
Let's see. What else is it? In My Life's on Rubber Soul. The Michelle. One of the big lines they always talk about on Rubber Soul that changed was if you talk about like in 1964, it was I Want to Hold Your Hand was their biggest song. And Rubber Soul came out in 65, 1 year later, a year and a half later. And in Michelle, there's a line that says, if you told her when she was young, pain would lead to pleasure. That's like such a dramatic shift in a year in lyrical writing. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or that a man would break his back to earn for his daily leisure. Anyway, it's such a shift and such a great increase in writing style and ability that no one else was doing at the time. They did a lot of things that no one else was doing, and then everybody sort of followed.
Yes, great line, but not Michelle. They discuss Beatlemania and talk about the stench of urine after Beatles shows, another hilarious anecdote. They then talk about the similarity in the deaths of John Lennon, Elvis, and Michael Jackson. And your guess on what the heck they're talking about is as good as mine. So Think Funny isn't. It frankly is a dramatically unfunny podcast, even less entertaining than, well, this one. But in the interest of fairness, and partly in disbelief, I listened to their first podcast, A Look at the Beginning of World War I, which was as unfunny as it was historically pointless and inaccurate, and I listened to the episode that preceded the Beatles episode, about the side-splitting Zodiac Killer. No comment. So Think Funny is a hard pass. Surely you can find something better to do with your time, even if I couldn't.
Speaking of my hat, I'd like to do something for you before I go. It's a song, and I'm going to do it a cappella. That means with my hat on. And it's a medley of Beatle tunes. Medley of Beatle tunes, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoy doing it to you. Medley of Beatle tunes. We don't want a revolution and all. We all want to change the world. But if you go talking about destruction, Don't you know that you can count me in the town where I was born? Live a man who sailed the sea. And he tells me, hey, Judah, do you want to know a secret? Oh, do you promise not to tell? Eleanor Rigby used to be mad at my school. The teachers that taught me weren't Desmond, Vera, Chuck, and I am you, and you are me, and we are all together in a yellow submarine. Well, I just had to laugh. I saw Lucy in the sky with Michelle Marvel alone on the hill, picking the rice from the church where the wedding has been a hard day's night. Suddenly, I want to hold your help. I want to hold your need somebody. I want to hold your hand. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hey. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to I Am the Podman, a Beatles podcast review. I hope you have enjoyed the show. Please remember to like and subscribe. If you have a Beatles-related podcast that you would like me to review, please feel free to email me at iamthepodman@gmail.com. That's iamthepodman@gmail.com. Now it's time to say goodnight. Peace and love. Imagine.